Greetings everybody, welcome back to another episode of Nuts and Bolts. We're going to turn down that music a little bit so that you can hear me, the amazing, the great Straight Jacket Jim. Bit going on this week with Nuts and Bolts. We've returned with round 4 after the Easter break. It's been good fun having a bit of time off, but even better to get back into the world of tanks action. So let's get this going. First game of round 4 was Conquerors versus the Scorpions. So this one was going to be fairly interesting. Conquerors coming off a win against the Sentinels. Scorpions still searching for that first win, but on 3 draws. No losses yet for them. So the first game was a little bit of a funny game. Not quite sure what was going on early on from JT. He sort of sat in the middle in the capture point trying to capture, obviously. The Scorpions were in a bit of trouble early on, but they managed to peg it back for a 2-on-1 tank advantage. But the issue became that Callum, the last player alive for the Conquerors, was a long way out, so they couldn't chase him down. In the end, they pulled on some cap pressure, but Callum managed to come round and just get a reset on them and get a win on the time defense. The second round with Scorpions on defense, Conquerors on attack. Conquerors tried for a quick 3-tank capture like they did against the Sentinels the last week. Fortunately, Scorpions were prepared for that and shut that down pretty quickly, with the Scorpions taking the win on the defense there. Then on to the Himmelsberg map after that, with Conquerors on defense. Scorpions did have some good plays early on there. They moved on to capture pretty quick. They defended pretty well. But eventually the Conquerors got around and started getting reset shots onto the Scorpions. So the Scorpions pulled out for a brawl, and they were doing really well. They just left that charge a little bit too late, and the Conquerors ended up getting a timed win there. You can see there where the HP difference is, and 4 tanks versus 2, but the time ran out and the Conquerors get the win on defense. And the last game, Scorpions on defense on Himmelsdorf right here. You can see how there was a bit of a brawl going on, but Conquerors just couldn't get good angles on the Scorpions there, and Napalmer there just brought up his 3000 damage, which is pretty huge in terms of world of tanks, and they just ended up farming up the Conquerors there at the end to get the win on that round, and the Conquerors and Scorpions ending up in a 2-2 draw. Second game, this was my one for pick of the round, and it did have some pretty good action in there and got pretty close in times. But this is Action X versus Sentinels. Action X with 2 wins and a draw. Sentinels with 1 win. I think they had two draws and a loss. So this one was looking to be a pretty cool game here. So on Sand River, Action X on defense. The Sentinels pushed on to capture a point, but the Action X repositioned quite well and just managed to bleed out the Sentinels and get their win on attack there. Not to be outdone, the Action X went on the attack. He had a bit of a fishtail there from Dongalord. Some big donger action happening down there. Broke his tread, but still managed to get the repair kit off and help Action X. So I don't quite know what the setup the Sentinels were going for. You can see in the trench there they had a couple of tanks stuck down there. Yes, you couldn't really fire on them, but they also couldn't really come out and help at all. So just let the Action X get in and do all the attacking and come away with the win on attack, going up 2-up in this series. So round 3, back on Himmelsdorf, there was a really good setup here where the 2 Sentinels tanks sort of rolled in to a crossfire, and you'd think that this was a good setup by Action X, and you did wonder why they didn't actually end up winning this match. They came very close. So this bit at the end, Dongalor's just holding out for that, hoping for that timed victory. He's taking a lot of damage on his front armor, but eventually it must have been under a second left, and the Sentinels just managed to come around, get that damage, and cause the Action X loss there. Then Game 4. Game 4 was very even for a lot of it. There was just a lot of setup, a lot of back and forth there, until eventually Sentinels managed to find some way through with a kill. and that just set off a chain reaction that once that one tank went, the floodgates opened, Sentinels just went for it and managed to take out the win on defense there. So bringing it back to another draw for the evening, 2-2 for Action X and Sentinels. Game 3, Auckland Archers and Brisbane Bulldogs. So this one started off with Archers on defence of Sand River here. We've seen Sand River a few times tonight. Madhouse started off, got isolated pretty quickly and got taken out of the match. And they did try a lot to get some cap pressure on the Bulldogs, but they just couldn't manage to quite get there in the end. In the end, Archers ended up with a 5-3 tank advantage. They did pull back a bit, but just couldn't quite get there in the end. So, second round with Bulldogs on defence. Like, there was a bit of a slow build-up, but it tended to favour the Bulldogs. Bulldogs took the HP advantage and tank advantage of 1, which ended up doing it for them and managed to get them the win on defence on Sand River for round 2, bringing it for 1-1 at the changeover to the Cliffs map. Cliffs? Yes, sorry, this is Cliffs. Sorry, I had to double check, see how it was, make sure that I got it right. So it turned into a brawl about halfway into the match. Unfortunately, this didn't favour the Archers. You can see here Celestia trying his best to get away, but was ultimately gunned down. And that particular match, the Bulldogs won on defence there. Then in the last game, we got down to a sort of a similar situation to, I think it was game 1 of the first game, where one tank was so far away. So the Archers got on the capture and just made cap pressure, because if the Bulldogs player didn't come out and try and do something, AVP, sorry, that's who it is. If he didn't come out and try and do something, the game was going to be over. But in the end, he couldn't do enough, and that was it for that, bringing the Archers versus Bulldogs game into a 2-2 draw as well. On to game 4, my Perth Panthers, hoping that they could bring something out tonight on Muravanka. Panthers versus Matildas. So Matildas tried some early cap pressure. They seemed to be doing all right. They had a little bit going for them there, but then Geordie got bled out a whole heap and just let the Panthers come in, get some resets on, stop that capture by the Matildas there. Eventually, Panthers just whittled it down to a 5v2 tank advantage and ended up taking the win on defence there. Round 2 with the Matildas on defence. Lightning Man did some really good scouting fairly early on. He even managed to move onto capture and get the timer down to 10 seconds before Geordie managed to get a reset on him. So the rest of the Panthers did then move on to the other capture point, but unfortunately the Matildas did have a good response, and Panthers ended up losing with all their tanks going down. You can see there, ended up with a 3-tank advantage. It was almost timed out anyway, 15 seconds of timeout, but they managed to get Lightning Man there with that last kill. Game 3, back on Himmelsdorf this time. Panthers on defence. JS from the Panthers got spotted pretty early, and as a consequence the Panthers bled out a bit. They did manage to bring it down and get a relatively even HP, but unfortunately when it came to tank advantage there was a rather large discrepancy towards the Matildas, so they ended up taking out game 3, and at that point, what was it? It was a 1-2, so Matildas secured at least a draw after that game, but still one round to go. It was very important, so Matildas on defence at Himmelsdorf. Artie Noob went down fairly early in the game, and then Panthers just managed to go on a bit of a spree there and got the Matildas down to one tank left with 4 of theirs, so that was a really significant tank advantage and the Panthers were able to win round 4, also bringing out another draw for round 4 of the World of Tanks ANZ Premier League. So unfortunately, what does that mean for the ladder? For the ladder, it means that we look like this. Now, if you're keeping score at home with all draws, it means everybody got 1 point each. So the ladder is unchanged from before Easter. So round 4 ladder looks exactly the same as round 5, just everybody gets an extra point. Action X still out in front. Those 2 early wins still counting for a lot there, because they're still a decent amount in front of the next competitors there. So with them sitting on 8 points, Christchurch Conquerors and North Sydney Sentinels both sitting on 5 points as well, with 1 win, 2 losses, and 1 win, 2 draws, and 1 loss. Then we've got the Auckland Archers, the Matildas, and the Scorpions all sitting on 4 wins. Then in equal 7th, we've got the Brisbane Bulldogs and Perth Panthers sitting on 3 draws, no wins, 1 loss. So it still looks a bit dire for some of those teams, but when we were talking with CJ and JT last week in the interview, with very much that even these bottom teams, if either Brisbane or Perth pick up a win, that's 3 points they get. All of a sudden, if we're talking draws, all of a sudden a win will pop them right up. Like you could go from last to second in the space of a week. It's really crazy how tight this competition still is, and there's still a chance for anybody to make finals. So we've got another 3 rounds to play out, and even a win from any of those teams below there, and the middle of the pack teams, we're talking the Auckland Archers, the Melbourne Matildas, and the South Sydney Scorpions, all of them have a very good chance of still being able to make top spot. All they need to do is grab a win and can knock Adelaide Action X off that top spot. So Adelaide need to just keep their focus on the game. If they can pull out 1 more win, I'd say that's probably secured them top spot for the season, for season 2 of the ANZ Premier League. So they just really need to focus on that, and just the rest of the wins is what's going to get you up there, is because with 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, you're always going to climb that ladder a lot quicker with the wins. So that's going to be it's going to be imperative for anybody that wants to make finals. So we're going to go now to the play of the round. My play of the round this week got to be Donga Lord. I was trying to find something else, because I did notice that the World of Tanks ANZ Twitter page picked this one as their... Oh, excuse me for a second. Still getting rid of the cough from my cold last week. But yes, the ANZ World of Tanks Twitter page also picked this as their play of the round. But it is such a good one. Like, Donga Lord is there fighting hard. He just has to survive. All he needed to do was survive for probably another second, and Adelaide Action X would have won that. Unfortunately, he didn't, but the fact that he survived as long as he did, like, he's already down significant on his HP. He just kept his armour front and just did his best, and in the end, it was less than a second between him and victory. So that one gets my play of the round. So let's have a look at the fantasy points. So I'm sad to say, I think I only had 1 of these guys in my fantasy team, and I dropped down a few spots this week. I think I'm 35th out of 160, so I'm still counting it as a win, but I've dropped down a bit. I've got to do better this week to bring my fantasy league team back up. Still open if you want to jump in. You can jump in the fantasy league. There is some in-game currency up for grabs, so jump in, have a go with that. Learn the name of the team. I'm actually this is what's a little bit funny about the league at the moment. So we've got the Panthers, who are equal last, have 2 teams in there. One of those team members pulled out a 300-point game. Right. And then we have Action X, who also have 2 players in there, Colin and Donga Lord. And Colin got 364.7 points this week in the fantasy league, and they're at the top of the table. So really, your players can come from anywhere when you're talking about your fantasy league. So keep an eye out, watch those tables, and get your picks in for week 5 coming up this Friday of the ANZ Fantasy League. Now, before we move on to the ANZPL games for this week, I do want to mention that the World of Tanks ANZBL has started off this week too. So on Monday just gone, the first game of the ANZB League kicked off. So this competition is like your second tier division for the World of Tanks ANZ esports, featuring 4 teams. The Cairns Comets, they made a comeback. So this Cairns Comets were a team that were in the ANZPL Season 1. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it back for Season 2, but they've got a team in for the B League. So with them, the Canberra Centurions, the Hawthorn Hellcats, and Wellington Wolverines. So I did have a quick look at the VOD from Monday night about how the teams went. So you can watch, like I said, you can watch it, watch it yourself. The VOD from Monday is up there. Those games happen every Monday night from 6 p.m. Western Australian time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 9 p.m. New Zealand time. And this week there was Centurions versus Wolverines and Hellcats versus Comets. Wolverines annihilated the Centurions with a 4-0 win there, and the Hellcats and the Comets ended up with a 2-2 draw. Now this league will go for 6 rounds, with the last round being on the 17th of May, which is the week before the grand final of the ANZPL at Fortress Melbourne on the 22nd of May. So the league is still there. You could it's more tanks blowing up each other. Why would you not want that? And good to watch. Good to see the Comets coming back as well. So very happy to see them and get back into World of Tanks ANZ B League there. So moving on to the games for this week. We have Adelaide Action X and the Brisbane Bulldogs kicking off at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's 4 o'clock Perth time and 7 o'clock New Zealand time. Followed by the Auckland Archers versus Melbourne Matildas, Christchurch Conquerors versus the Perth Panthers coming on at 8 Australian Eastern Standard Time. And then the Sydney Derby, the North Sydney Sentinels versus South Sydney Scorpions at 9 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is 7 o'clock Perth time and 10 o'clock New Zealand time. That last one's going to be my pick of the rounds, because South Sydney have been looking reasonably good, and Sentinels are not looking as good as they have been. So I think that one's going to be a ripper game, and with Sydney Derby on the line there, I reckon that's going to be the game to watch. So that's going to be my pick for match of the round for round 5. Now, it's what you've all come for. It's time for another tank fact. This one's going to be funny, because, you know, we normally think of tanks as they're just big armoured boxes. They got a gun on the front. Sometimes you might just get a little bit of movement. Sometimes the whole top might be able to move around. And that's kind of your standard tank. But there have been some interesting tanks, particularly with D-Day. So after the Normandy landing in World War II, was it? I think, hang on, let me consult my notes. Yes. After the Dunkirk, sorry. After they evacuated all the soldiers from France, the British quickly looked to seeing how they could come back and get into the mainland, continental Europe, so they could keep fighting over there. They'd endured the Blitz, and now they needed to fight on somehow. Stiff upper lip, old chap, as the British might say. Enter a gentleman called Percy Hobart, and it was his job to design some tanks that would help them do this. So, one tank they designed, so they were always quite concerned about, because they usually put the tanks all on one boat. So they decided that if that boat got sunk, suddenly all those tanks got lost, and everybody that was in it would drown. So they put big inflatable rings around some of the tanks, so that if those boats did go down, then these tanks could pull the cord and they would float in. And you still have a tank. That was the Sherman DD, I believe it was. But, yes Natty, the more you know. But that wasn't the only sort of odd tank that they had for that landing, because they did end up designing a heap of different tanks for different reasons. There was also the Sherman Crab, who kind of had this flail at the front. The idea was that the chains on the flail just spun rather rapidly, and the idea was that it'd be out the front of the tank, kind of like a fishing rod type deal, and would spin out there and detonate any mines that were there. It also had the added bonus of ripping up any barbed wire or any sort of impediments like that to the troops. So this tank went through first, and it just pulled out a whole heap of anti-infantry stuff and let them get through. But there were also support tanks. So one of the concerns was that the beach where they landed wouldn't be strong enough to support these tanks. So they put a tank with a bobbin on the back of it that would run up the beach and unspool. You know, like you get those disabled beaches where they've got that track that goes all the way down to the water. Imagine that coming out of the water, but for tanks, so that they could get out easier. There was even a tank that was designed for other tanks to drive over. So this tank would go up and hit a wall, drive partly up it, stop there, and then let other tanks drive up its back. So there was a lot of tanks that did different things for this landing, and that helped the Allies helped the Allies survive D-Day and make a successful beachhead there. So that is a lot of different tanks to do a lot of different things, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is another tank fact. And that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching Nuts and Bolts as episode 6. Whew, episode 6 already. Won't be too long. It's only another month now. What's the date today? The 13th. So probably another 5 weeks until that final at Fortress Melbourne. So that will be amazing to see. A big live event for the 2 grand finalists in World of Tanks ANZPL. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget Premier League is on twitch.tv/World of Tanks ANZ Friday night from 6 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. Get amongst it, watch it. I know Natty will. She'll be supporting the Action X there. I'll be supporting the Panthers. Pick your team, follow them, look at them all around this outside here. They're there for you to support. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.